her interviews are, again, they're almost always with friendlier outlets.
Sure.
Again, you know, MSNBC, the host Stephanie had like basically endorsed her. You know, you know, before that she sat down with Oprah, who spoke at the Democratic National Convention.
Right.
You know, I think the toughest interview she might have had was, you know, with CNN's Dana Bash or Dana Bash, and you know, she did that with Governor Walz.
Right.
And then she's, you know, she's doing these like local interviews where the stakes are not that high. So she's still very cautious with the national media.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined by national political correspondent Mabinty Quarshie. Mabinty, Vice President Harris, who's been under criticism for a lack of media interviews, has sat down for a big one. How did it go, and what were some of the takeaways?
So I will say that the interview with MSNBC, it was a very friendly interview. It wasn't like the hardest interview I've seen her get. It wasn't a lot of grilling.
Right.
But I think one of the key takeaways is that Kamala Harris senses and understands that the American public, they don't really know her as a presidential candidate. You know, she became the nominee in August. It's only been like roughly 2 months. And so she realizes she has to explain her economic policies to voters because they don't know where she stands. You know, they understand that she's Biden's vice president, but who she is as a presidential candidate is not firmly baked into their minds. And if she doesn't lay out her policies, the Trump campaign will, and it's not going to be to her benefit.
Sure.
So there was a lot of discussion about the economy. Obviously, she had given her speech in Pittsburgh earlier before the MSNBC interview. And, you know, she spent a lot of time attacking Trump and, you know, trying to link him to the billionaire class while she is the, you know, supposed middle class.
Middle class kid.
Yeah, you know, brings up her mother, you know, my
Right.
mom raised me and my sister, you know. It was, to be fair, a lot of rephrasing things she's already said, but doing it in a way that will reach, you know, the most fervent voters and even some of those low voter turnout people that she needs to win in the battleground states. And then obviously, you know, there are a few issues that are hers, so she gets asked about abortion, you know.
Sure.
Again, not the hardest interview, but a way to introduce herself to people who don't know her.
Is there any thought that this might be the beginning of more interviews?
I'm not sure, because her interviews are, again, they're almost always with friendlier outlets.
Sure.
Again, you know, MSNBC, the host Stephanie had like basically endorsed her. You know, you know, before that she sat down with Oprah, who spoke at the Democratic National Convention.
Right.
You know, I think the toughest interview she might have had was, you know, with CNN's Dana Bash or Dana Bash, and you know, she did that with Governor Walz.
Right.
And then she's, you know, she's doing these like local interviews where the stakes are not that high. So she's still very cautious with the national media, and I suspect because she doesn't want to say anything that will become this viral meme that helps tank her, you know, campaign.
Right, or drive any kind of negative news cycle as we're getting closer to the election. So there's been this big policy dispute. We don't talk about policy very much in politics anymore, but there's been a big policy dispute actually between Harris and Trump. Talk a little bit about what this one issue is that Harris is really honed in on and Trump continues to defend.
Yeah, the Harris campaign and her allies are really attacking Trump over tariffs. You know, this week Trump says he's going to, you know, enforce a 100% or 200% tariff on companies such as John Deere, which, you know, have said they're going to move their bases to Mexico. You know, Kamala Harris during the MSNBC interview says Trump's not serious. She has Mark Cuban do this press call where he basically says the same thing.
Right.
Trump's not serious. There is a bit of dispute of whether these tariffs, if Trump were to be elected, whether it would lead to higher costs for the consumer. But you know, Harris is, you know, finds this as an issue to once again paint herself as the middle class person and Trump as the out of touch person who's going to raise your prices. And it's like her attempt to blunt the attacks of her being linked to Biden when, you know, inflation has been bad. I'm not sure if the average voter cares about tariffs.
Sure.
Like, you know, it needs to be put into simpler terms, like, is this going to affect groceries and gases? So they're battling over tariffs, and again, it's mostly because, you know, Harris is catching up to Trump on the economy. He still leads her, like the American public still trusts him over her when it comes to the economy and immigration, but her numbers have increased, and so I think, you know, we only have roughly 40-ish days to the election, so she really has to like define herself before Election Day.
So there have been a couple of attempts on former President Trump's life. There's been talk of the Iranians trying to access Trump campaign information and disseminate it. The former president had some pretty strong words that were directed at Iran over this week.
Yeah, he was in North Carolina, and he basically said he would blow up Iran to smithereens if he, you know, were reelected. If, you know, he basically said if, you know, a foreign country was attacking a presidential candidate, he's blowing them up to smithereens, which is a lot.
Right.
But also, you know, he says this while Iran's president is in the U.S. for the UN General Assembly.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's not a light threat, you know. Trump is, he tends to try and do what he says he's going to do. So, and I also want to say, you know, his campaign had already said they'd been briefed about, you know, Iran trying to destabilize the election by trying to assassinate him. So I think it's a good reminder that, you know, there's a lot of focus about, you know, will the, you know, election be safe from a domestic angle, but actually, you know, we still have foreign adversaries who might be trying to interfere in our elections for their benefit, not ours.
Trying to swing public opinion and, you know, get it so that it's more beneficial to their governments.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mabinty. You can read Mabinty and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.